Welcome to the Pharma Source podcast. How can pharma navigate global supply chain uncertainty? On today's podcast, I'm joined by Frank Binder, Managing Director at GSCA, the Global Supply Chain Advisors, and formerly Head of Supply Chain roles at companies such as Santen, BMS, and Novartis. And today we're going to talk about how the pharma supply chain is responding to tariffs, regulatory uncertainty, and the shift from global to regional hub models, which seems to be characterizing 2025 into 26. Frank, welcome to the podcast today.
Thanks, Luke. Happy to be here.
Great to have you. To begin with then, it'd be great to get your assessment as to what's happening with the global supply chain since the start of the year. There's been so much going on. What's your sort of overview of the year so far?
Yeah, I mean, we had a lot of uncertainties that were created by the US mostly. And this is, of course, shaking up the whole pharmaceutical world, even though the US makes on a global scale across all industries about a bit more than 10% of all trade. For pharmaceuticals, it's very different. And also the US as a market, of course, is still number one in the world. So for pharma, it has been quite unsettling.
How much of an impact would you say that the tariffs and the reshoring has had so far? I mean, in terms of the announcements, we've been tracking over $450 billion worth of investments, which the pharma companies are saying that they're putting into facilities. How much of that is actually happening, is actually enforceable?
Enforceable, I think, strictly speaking, exactly zero. But of course, even though in these announcements there is certainly a lot of positioning and making the own company being a good child, following the desires of the U.S. government, but it's also not random. There is certainly, and it also makes economic sense. There is certainly a movement to reshoring into the U.S. That's very clear. It might not be, and I wouldn't expect, honestly, the full 400 or so billion that have been announced, but it's also not completely divorced from reality.
Would you say that the infrastructure is ready for this level of investment? Construction capacity, workforce, costs? What would you say the reality is likely to be?
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be interesting because I wouldn't expect these investments to be evenly distributed across the country, but probably much rather targeting existing pharma clusters such as the RTP, Boston, San Diego, and so on. So all these investments, when they are realized, they will be in competition with each other during the building and then during operations. So workforce for construction people, but also workforce for operators would be in conflict potentially with each other. And then we also have to remember that the US has introduced significant tariffs on vast category of materials like aluminum, steel, and so on. And that is going to affect a lot of the inputs to building such a plant as well. So I would expect at least construction costs would go up, but also there could be difficulties to secure some specialized equipment at the same time. And it would be more expensive, that's for sure.
What has the impact been for pharma companies this year when it comes to dealing with the tariffs, supply chain disruption? What's it meaning to the supply chain?
Well, there have been several instances of anticipated shipping triggered by announcement of what is to come. Swiss pharma companies, as I understand, have moved significant amounts of finished products into the US in anticipation, and other, I mean, the European companies have certainly done something similar. So there have been distortions in shipping pattern. I don't think it has been full-scale disruptions, but for sure, strong upticks and then later declines in shipping activity. That certainly has been quite prevalent in the pharma supply chain. And I think one thing that is underestimated, but when I talk to my colleagues who are engaged in trade compliance in the US, it has become much more complex to import products into the US. The rules have multiplied. They are not always very clear. At the same time, Customs and Border Protections and FDA have stepped up their enforcement actions. So complexity has gone up, and I would say companies that are not 100% sure that they're in a good shape when it comes to importing pharmaceuticals, they probably need to ask for expert help as urgently. And then, other than that, I think in the pharma industry, we are in a situation where we are really in a straitjacket to quite some extent with registered sources of materials. So there has certainly not been yet a big change in a big shift in sourcing, but I would expect that this will come once all the trade deals are really clear and the industry knows what figures to calculate with.
Are you thinking more then about the starter materials than the finished product?
In the first place, I think about finished products, drug products, but also API. I think there is, especially around the API, there's quite some uncertainty. Will they be included into tariffs? There has been an announcement of 100% tariffs on pharmaceuticals. I mean, most countries in the world had zero tariff on pharmaceuticals to begin with some very few exceptions. So it is in a way quite unprecedented for the US to levy any tariff at all. But then, of course, 100% is quite significant. And this tariff action has been suspended in favor of company by company negotiations of the US government to lower prices. So in addition to all the tariff uncertainty, I think there's also a big pricing uncertainty in the US market, and all of that is affecting companies' decisions.
Interesting. And when it comes to your peers working in supply chain, leaving aside the high politics and the big negotiations, how are you seeing them responding? Certainly when we're speaking to external manufacturing leaders, a lot of them are telling us that they're trying, where possible, to sort of wait and see and to ride out the uncertainty. But I guess when you're in supply chain, you have to make logistical decisions every single day. How's that working in practice?
Yeah, I mean, short term there is not that much. I think the anticipation actions that I spoke about have played a role. I think there's also companies looking at free trade zones and things like that, so that they can better coordinate import activities with some changes in regulation. But I think the wait and see approach is probably most problematic when it comes to investment decisions, because I think what companies now starting to realize is that we are not in a transient moment. We're not just let's just wait one more month and then everything will be clear. I think I'm really worried about the way investment decisions would be made right now and in the near future.
Because everything has slowed down.
Yes, it has slowed down, but also in the end, for every investment, you need to have a business case. And it's not easy to make such a business case because there's so much uncertainty about what the tariffs will be, what the pricing will be. On the other hand, it's impossible to continue a wait and see approach because the current situation, I think these are new rules to the game. It's not like something that will go away in a couple of months. I think will have to live with that for years or even decades. There is not the previous rules of the game of rules-based international trade and widespread exemption of pharmaceuticals from tariffs. I think that is gone. So companies need to figure out how to make decisions affecting their network.
Do you think we're at the end then of truly global supply chains and moving into that regional hub and spoke model? Do you think that's likely to be the future for the foreseeable years?
I think there is a clear trend to regionalization, but I don't expect that this will apply to each and every product. Likewise, we are not going to have iPhone factories in every country in the world, not in the foreseeable future and probably never. I think that some API, some drug products will definitely continue to be globally sourced. Maybe the volume is just too small to be manufactured in several places. Maybe the economies of scale are totally against it, but I would certainly expect that there will be more regionalization in the future and that we will have more instances of region for region model. So not saying, oh, I'm going to manufacture in Europe for Asia and the US as well, but maybe we'll manufacture in Europe for Europe, in the US for US. That is a trend I will see that will affect many products for sure.
Yeah. How do companies manage to balance cost in that model? Because obviously, from a pure cost of goods perspective, centralizing manufacturing into one low cost location makes a lot of sense. How do you see companies dealing with that?
Well, I think at the basis of everything, there should be a risk assessment in terms of country risk, of trade, of exposure. And companies need to set also priorities. And I expect that companies will find that maybe for their top revenue drivers, for drugs that are most exposed to tariffs in a certain region, and also most at risk, they would increase supply chain resilience, certainly including dual sourcing, and use that at the same time, not just for increasing supply chain resilience, but also to optimize the tariffs. So I expect that companies will do this, especially for their top revenue drivers and drugs that they absolutely cannot afford to have any lower profitability.
Mm. Yeah. And then for generics, it's pretty hard to turn a profit in generics anyway.
It is tough. I mean, the margins are really small. It's already causing problems in a completely unhindered supply chain.
Mm.
We all know about the stock out issues of some generics. So I think the US government has also recognized that. I think that the tariffs on generics, if any, will be really small
Mhm.
because it wouldn't be feasible, I think, just from an economic standpoint, to move big parts of the generic sourcing from one region to another.
Where do you see APIs fitting in? A lot of the conversation has been about drug product facilities that are still dependent on sourcing the APIs from a single source. Is that really solving the supply security problem?
Yeah, I think if you consider the API as really the point where the chemical supply chain comes together before it branches out into the galenic supply chain, API itself is quite important. And the huge benefit of if you are able to keep inventory of API as a buffer stock to ensure resilience, you have quite a big benefit in terms of shelf life. Well, there's no shelf life. You have retest dates. You might be able to recrystallize the API if over time. So
Mhm.
the API could be stored and much more easily stored because the volume is smaller over a much longer time. So I think it would give a lot of supply chain resilience just to be able to have API inventories.
With all the uncertainty, what would you say the opportunities are for the contract manufacturing sector? And what kind of role could CDMOs play in navigating those risks?
Well, I think contract manufacturing offers an opportunity to diversify the manufacturing base, also from a geographical standpoint, at midterm, not and so
Mhm.
you don't. I mean, if you start with a project to build a new manufacturing plant, that's going to take years and hundreds of millions of dollars of expenses. If you find a CDMO that suits the product you're making, that is also in the right place, you can be considerably faster and do it without major investments as well. So that is something I would expect that should be good arguments for CDMOs because they can really offer, if they have if they have the right geographical location of their manufacturing base, they can really offer an interesting strategic addition to any pharma company.
Mm. At a time when many different scenarios have to be in play, how can they help with offering multiple options rather than just one particular location? Thinking of companies like Fujifilm, for example, or Wuxi, who've been able to standardize.
Yeah, I have recently seen the example of Wuxi, and they have they're really driving standardization as a competitive advantage.
Mm,
And I think that makes sense. They're really going very far in that, also thanks to single-use technology, where they can really make sure that the equipment and the process are the same in multiple places. So they are offering setting up dual sourcing even right from the start, even during
mm.
clinical development. I think that is a really interesting thing to consider, because it would significantly also speed up the transfer if there's a transfer to be done.
And that could be in multiple continents where they've got a footprint.
Yeah, I mean, probably companies wouldn't go probably from singles being single sourced to having four different locations
Mm,
that make a drug. But for sure, if you can realize dual sourcing, and there is even potential to source from a third region, that is very attractive because we might expect that protectionistic actions multiply, and then all of a sudden you might be forced to say dual sourcing is not enough anymore.
mm.
And then it becomes even more important that there is standardization and making technology transfer easier and faster.
We interviewed the chairman of Fujifilm recently, and he was talking about their Kojo X methodology, and it's this, global network which is in quite a modular way, so things can be easily transferred from one facility to another.
Yeah, that's something that is really future oriented. I think a modular approach as the high
Hmm.
standardization is going to be very important in the
Yeah.
future.
What advice would you have, Frank, for what pharma companies should be doing in terms of their supply chain? Are there any particular steps which you'd advise people to take as they prepare for this prolonged period of uncertainty?
Yes, I'm currently looking into supply chain resilience, business
Hmm.
continuity management a lot, and I would say it is necessary for pharma companies to make sure they have, on one hand, a comprehensive enterprise risk management program in place that also tells them what are the priorities from a senior leadership perspective, which are the products that should be protected, that where we should have resilience, where we need to make sure that tariffs cannot affect the business case in a
Hmm.
significant way. And then go ahead and focus on resilience and business continuity management. Um, so that means you have to have business continuity management plans that contain the actions that will create resilience in your supply chain, that will create flexibility, agility, so you can switch sources when you need for the right products, of course. And I think this is a multi-year activity. That's not something that can be done in a couple of months. And I would recommend every company to have a comprehensive and well-resourced and well-funded program in place that looks at the right commercial priorities.
Hmm. Can technology help that?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think we can use technology in the development of these plans.
Mhm.
But then in the execution, that's where it really counts. I think that's where what we talked about, standardization plays a big role.
Hmm.
I think simplification of processes plays a big role. And in the end, you also will need to have end-to-end planning systems that really support scenario plannings, because that will be very important to have the flexibility to react to some disruptions.
Hmm.
So technology plays a big part in
Yeah.
that as well.
I noticed earlier, Frank, you posted about rare earths and why that's so important and the risk that China controls over 80% of the global supply. Why is this so important and what are the implications of this?
Yeah, basically, without rare earths, there is no high-tech production that can happen. These
Mm,
rare earths, they're everywhere, and Now we find ourselves in a situation where China controls 80% of the supply, and they were able to use that in the negotiations with the US as a very effective leverage. Leverage being, in the end, the capability to inflict pain on somebody. Not actually doing it, but threatening it. That's already sufficient normally. And thinking about why does it happen? Is it so that only China has these rare earths? That's not the case at all. There are quite a couple of countries that have rare earths. It's just that it's not very profitable to extract and to refine them. So most countries just let their industry slip away and go out of business. And China pushed strategically to build up that, and they built up leverage. And all of a sudden, now countries are realizing that they do not have supply chain resilience for high tech, which is kind of a problem. So you need really to take strategic actions with enough foresight to build leverage, but also resilience, and that takes years. And that has been completely overlooked from a strategic perspective. And as a pharma industry, we shouldn't get ourselves into this kind of situation.
It's a very interesting case study, isn't it?
It is, yeah, it is. It shows how you really need, well, it's not a surprise. Everybody knows that you need rare earths for making high-tech products. But what to derive from that, doing a risk assessment and realizing that in the end, China is not that interested in making money by exporting these rare earths, but they might be much more interested in using them as leverage.
Yeah,
that was completely overlooked, and I think everybody needs to get sharper in terms of risk assessment and strategic thinking.
A final question for you, Frank. If you were to appreciate it's very hard at the moment, if you were to look a few years into the future, say, what do you think the pharma supply chain landscape would look like? I mean, out of everything that's happening at the moment, what do you think will have stuck and what might potentially revert back?
I think the forces that now drive onshoring or regionalization, I expect these forces to continue. I mean, we can really see that governments, and it's really not just about the US government, but governments all over the world are saying, hey, this is we want to have our own industry, we want to protect it. There are strong forces that drive regionalization and onshoring, and they're not going to go away anytime soon. So I would expect that in 3 to 5 years, pharma supply chains will be more regionalized. There will still be global elements, but they will be more regionalized. But it also means that costs will be higher. I expect as a result of all of this, the cost of goods will go up. So profitability of the industry is probably going to be a bit less in the future.
Frank, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure speaking to you.
Thanks, Luke. It's a pleasure.